Hi, thanks for tuning in to another Literacy Friday session. In today's lesson, we look at careers in literacy. The first profession we'll examine today is that of a literacy specialist. A literacy specialist is responsible for preparing and providing reading lesson plans, providing literacy materials, managing literacy programs and literacy intervention, and monitoring the literacy progress of students. So a literacy specialist has a lot to do. If a literacy specialist is at a school, he or she will have to prepare lesson plans for the literacy teachers. Now, sometimes these roles overlap, but that's not always the case. But a literacy specialist must be able to prepare lesson plans and provide these lesson plans for literacy purposes. So these are reading lesson plans. A literacy specialist must monitor the progress of his or her students. So he or she will have to have an understanding of reading levels and a deep understanding of what is necessary to take a student from one reading level to another, how to correct issues that the child is having or even an adult is having in literacy development. So even if the literacy specialist is not the one who has coordinated the literacy program, it's a duty of the literacy specialist to monitor the progress of the students, even as the students are enrolled in either the intervention that the specialist has coordinated or the literacy coordinator has prepared. Literacy specialists also know how to assess the readability of text so that the materials that are used are appropriate to the reading level of the students. Since the literacy specialist also has to monitor student progress, he or she should also be knowledgeable about how to conduct literacy assessment and how to interpret the data that is garnered from such assessment as well. It's normally the duty of the literacy teacher, though, to conduct the assessment. However, as I stated before, the role of literacy teacher and that of the literacy specialist often overlaps. In fact, many trained literacy specialists operate as literacy teachers. And in some jurisdictions, the training and qualification is the same for both a literacy teacher and a literacy specialist. It's just the scope of work for the literacy specialist may be more, and the literacy teacher definitely has to teach and be assigned to the classes. So the literacy teacher may not have to prepare the literacy lesson, but he or she will have to deliver the lesson that was prepared by the specialist. But most literacy teachers have to prepare their own reading lesson plans. Now, as you know, reading is just one component of literacy. So a literacy teacher has to understand that he or she has to be knowledgeable about all strands of literacy and facilitate the development of all strands within the classroom environment. If such professional provides this service on a private basis, he or she is normally referred to as a literacy tutor. And a literacy tutor tends to provide such service on a one-on-one basis with an individual student or a very small group. And we would have looked at small groups in previous videos. So a literacy tutor would normally not have more than 3 persons in a literacy session. We also have literacy coordinators, and a literacy coordinator is responsible for the development of literacy programs for a school. Now, he or she may not have to be the one to sit and put together the plan on his or her own, but the literacy coordinator is responsible for ensuring that that program is developed, whether or not he or she will have to source it from another literacy coordinator or a governmental program. The role here of the literacy coordinator is to ensure that a program is developed for this particular school. Now, there are many types of literacy programs that can be functioning simultaneously within a school, and we would have already had a lesson on that. Check out that video about the different types of literacy programs. The role of the literacy coordinator is to ensure that whatever the needs are for the students, such literacy needs are catered to through holistic programs that will foster their literacy development. And these can include pull out programs whereby it doesn't have to be in the general classroom program, but it's the duty of the literacy coordinator to ensure that there is a literacy curriculum in place for the school. So the literacy coordinator will collate all of the pre-assessment data that was gathered by the literacy specialists and literacy teachers, and then use that information to guide their research in developing a program or acquiring a program that is going to meet the needs of the students. In some jurisdictions, we have what are called regional literacy coordinators who manage the literacy programs in multiple schools. We also have literacy coaches. A literacy coach guides teachers. So the literacy coach is basically supporting the teacher so that the teacher can better support the students' literacy development. The literacy coach will meet with teachers, provide tips for the teachers that will improve their teaching style, improve how they deliver content to those who are reading below their grade level. And the literacy coach will also model best practices. So the literacy coach is supposed to be very knowledgeable about the content area that he or she is providing support in, and then guiding the teacher in how to bridge the gap for those students who are reading below their grade level. The literacy coach also provides feedback and monitors the teacher's performance. To be a literacy coach, it is good to have a strong background in general studies, because the teacher that you are guiding may not be a literacy teacher. So even if it's a math teacher, then the literacy coach should be able to guide the mathematics teacher in how to bridge a gap for students who are reading below their grade level. Then there's a literacy consultant who is similar to a literacy coach, except that the literacy consultant is working with school administrators. So he or she may not necessarily work directly with teachers, but the literacy consultant is working with school administrators and agencies, even government agencies. The literacy consultant is important in the planning of policies and programs and projects that will foster literacy development, and the consultant will also be an integral part of ensuring that these policies, programs, and projects are implemented. For example, a literacy consultant can guide a principal of a school in understanding how to make the school a print-rich environment on a whole and promote literacy school-wide. This consultant must also be able to connect the different stakeholders so that the school can get the necessary assistance in developing their literacy programs and projects. Now, to be employed as any of those professions that I mentioned thus far, you have to have at minimum a first degree in literacy studies. Usually, literacy studies is coupled with either linguistics or language studies, and language studies are often coupled with literature. So it is typical to see any of those professionals functioning in the literacy field, but also being perhaps like a writer or a language arts teacher or an English language teacher solely, a linguist, a literary agent, that sort of thing. And it's simply because of the scope of studies that they would have gone through in order to even have a career in this field. You may find also that a lot of persons who were trained in special education decided to just major in or zoom in on literacy, so they would even operate in jobs within the literacy field. Next up, I thought it important to look at a reading assistant. Now, a reading assistant doesn't always have a bachelor's degree, but most reading assistants have a background in early childhood education or special education. Reading assistants are often needed at the early childhood level and sometimes at the elementary level, and they work within the classroom space alongside the teacher, and it doesn't have to be the literacy teacher, it could be the general classroom teacher, and they're there for co-teaching purposes or to giving one-on-one attention to students who need it most in terms of literacy. For example, if in this grade 3 class there is one student who does not write too quickly, then rather than having the rest of the class be delayed by this slow writer, then the reading assistant would go next to the student with the same content that would have already been prepared by the teacher to guide the same student now in just going at his or her pace until the content is covered through writing. If the teacher has multiple activities planned for a particular lesson, then the reading assistant comes in very handy in facilitating multiple activities taking place at the same time, or for providing reinforcement of what was taught. These are 3 other jobs that are prevalent now in the field of literacy. In fact, the first is really trending: TESOL or ESL teacher. TESOL and ESL basically means the same. TESOL means teaching English to speakers of other languages, and ESL means English as a second language. So as an ESL teacher or TESOL teacher, you are here to just teach persons who are not native English speakers. And this skill set is critical to the field of literacy because in some contexts, learning a second language could be just as learning how to speak for the first time. Writers also are integral to the field of literacy because they have to provide reading material that will be able to be used at the different levels, different reading levels that is. So even from the primer level, there has to be reading content, and the writers are integral for this process. We also have speech language pathologists, also called speech therapists, and they work on correcting communication disorders, speech disorders, or making a person with a speech disorder more adaptable within their environment.